Welcome to the Thought Process. This is a space where I get to think out loud about ideas, life, and whatever I'm trying to understand in the moment. I don't always have answers here, just honest thoughts as they unfold. I'm really grateful you're here. So, let's dive in. Welcome back. Today we're diving into lesson 8 of 30 Before 30. Manifestation is real. Now, before I dive into today's topic, I just want to take a moment to say thank you. I am so grateful you are here, you are listening, and for the fact that I'm already at episode 8. This is insane. All right, now let's dive in. I love the topic of manifestation. If you know me, then you know that I've been obsessed with this topic since discovering it when I was 19. I first discovered it while surfing YouTube and coming across a creator who talked about manifestation and how to create things in your reality, how she turned her whole life around. I was mesmerized. I wanted to know everything about this thing called manifestation. So, of course, like every other young person does when they hear something about manifestation, I fell to The Secret, the book The Secret, right, by Rhonda Burns. And again, I read it and I was enamored with this concept. Like, how do people do this? Is this a real thing? I remember after reading it, just trying to apply these concepts in the book. And my friends, of course, like thought I was crazy. And probably to this day, I still think a lot of them think I am crazy when I talk about this stuff. But I just find so much satisfaction in how it's turned my entire life around. So I'm going to get to that. I truly think there's something so special when you find something and dive into it and just have this beginner mindset. Because when you're in this mindset before becoming an expert in a field or a topic, you don't have expectations. The bar is set so low, but in a good way. Like, you don't care if it happens or not. But in manifestation, that is the best energy to be in. Manifestation is such a funny thing because I truly believe it's so easy to do when you aren't thinking about it. Because, like I said, the more you learn about something, the more kind of hyper fixated you get on certain pieces or parts of the process or about doing stuff. You basically become a perfectionist in the worst way. And when you aren't so obsessed and needing it done, it shows up, right? Like, once we learn about the process and how to do it, we end up obsessing over it, and then it turns, and in turn, it ends up we end up trying to control the process to the nth degree, because that's just what our human brain wants to do. So after reading The Secret, I remember just finding every single self-help book I could find about manifestation, which is so funny because now, years later, I know that I'm meant to dive into topics head first because in my human design, I'm a generator with a 1-3 profile. If you don't know what human design is, it's basically your makeup, okay, of you need to basically, you can look up your human design chart online. It's very simple. You just need the birth date, time, and place, and it comes up with this energetic kind of breakdown. And it's so neat because the more I dove into that, the more I could understand why I do certain things. So, the meaning behind my 1-3 profile lines are that they're otherwise known as the investigator. So, I'm here to dive into subjects, topics, and learn all about them, but also here, to learn by working through them through trial and error, which I didn't realize until honestly probably like a month ago. I think that someone finally told me like what that actually meant, like a 1-3 profile line. And I was like, are you kidding me? Like, I have, and if you know me, like, anything you tell me, if you told me to like go try something, I would automatically go apply it in my life just to see if it works. I am such a trial and error girl, like 100% through and through. And I never understood that. I was just like, doesn't everybody do this? Doesn't everybody just try these things? And like, if it fails, it fails. But if it doesn't, like, keep doing it. Or like, like, if you came into my classroom, it's so funny because I have gone to so many professional development days where someone like introduces a new topic, a new concept, and then it's like the next day I've already started to implement it in my classroom to see if it actually works. While it takes people or teachers like years to implement these things, I'm just like, no, I'm going to try it. If it works, it works. If it doesn't, it doesn't. But at least I did it, which I think is so funny. So, going back to the topic, it really made me understand why, after almost 12 years of learning and living through it all, I have definitely refined how I use manifestation, but also kind of how I take in new information. And so over the years, I've definitely redefined what manifestation means to myself, okay, for myself. And so now I define manifestation as the act of having something in your imagination and creating it into your reality. Because there are so many different definitions of exactly what manifestation could be. And I think that a lot of people kind of get kind of derailed when they think that it honestly is magic. There is a component of magic, but it's not the whole concept. And so I always think it's wild when people say that manifestation is fake or not real, because to me it it's only real if it it is only real if you don't believe it. And by the way, like, we are manifesting 24/7. Everything in our reality is manifested by our never-ending thoughts and what we focus on. And so I just love the world of manifestation. I think it is because I'm an optimist and love all these things, spirituality, but I think there's so much more. It's so much more fun to believe that we are on this planet and are able to change and adapt and create whatever we want than the opposite, which is just not fun and honestly depressing. So, just why not believe and understand the science behind how our minds are limitless and how we're able to create anything we want? Because everything you want is attainable. It is possible. It just depends how badly you want it. And I'm not talking about in a desperate way, because if we want to get into the true process of manifestation, being desperate is not manifesting. Okay? And needless to say, I'm obsessed with the process and idea of manifestation, and I have learned how to manifest money, opportunities, people in the craziest way. So I want to share some of the ways in which I've manifested crazy things into my life, such as my body, my partner, um, which I scoff because right before meeting him, it just felt like, again, like, I can dive into manifestation a little bit more in another episode, but it truly does work in the 11th hour. And so when you have totally surrendered and not given up, when you have allowed and understood and surrendered to the point where you are okay either way, you are okay with this thing or without, that's when they show up. And that's why I scoff, because it was honestly in that moment of, being so okay with who I was and where I was at in life that he showed up. I've also manifested both my cars, my first dream car, which I will get to, and then my current car. I've manifested my current job, my previous job, our apartment we live in, just so many things along the way. And again, there's so many small things that I couldn't even tell you, how I've manifested, or things that have come about. But these are some really major things that I feel like are crazy stories. And so one of them I want to talk about is my car, because these are such good stories and both are very different. So I guess I'm going to talk about both my cars. My first car I ever bought was a Honda Civic in 2018. I know you're gonna just laugh when I say that that was my dream car. Like, I had wanted a Honda Civic probably since I was 10 years old. Like, it was my dream car. Oh, it's just like a chef's kiss. It is, oh, I just loved it. I loved it so much. And I had big dreams, but I had big dreams as a kid. And because my parents had one when we were growing up, but my dad had totaled it. And I never got to drive it as a real driver. I was so excited to like know that when I hit 15 and a half or 16, I was going to be able to drive it. And it just never happened because he totaled it. But I did get to try it out, test it out when I was 12 years old because my dad used to teach me how to drive in parking lots late at night. But that's for another day. Anyways, fast forward, I'm 22 years old and my brother totals the kid's car, like his and I car. My parents had gotten, not even gotten, my parents had basically gone down to one car and they had given us my mom's car so that we could share it between the two of us. So now we have no car to share. And the car my parents have provided us, I never see it because my brother just hogs it all the time. And it got to the point where I would fill up the gas and then I would never see the car until it was empty. And then I had to go fill it up again. And again, like it wasn't a great sharing system. Okay. So I just said to myself, you know what? Enough is enough. I'm not doing this anymore. I want my own car. So I told myself that I was going to manifest my dream car of a Honda Civic. Now, this whole process wasn't overnight. Manifestation is not an overnight process. It is, you're doing it for the long haul. So I was in it for the long haul. My first step was, my dad had said, why don't we get you a used car? I said, okay, I can do that. So I had my price, I had my budget of what I wanted to spend on a used car. So I did what any responsible adult would do. I took myself to the bank. And not only did I take myself to the bank, I got dressed up. I took myself to the bank like a respectable 22-year-old. I held my head up high and I talked to, I guess, like the banker person. Well, I don't even know what they're called. The person that decides how much you can afford as a loan. Because I wanted to know what financing was going to look like. Because again, with a used car, I didn't have enough money to completely pay it in cash, but I was hoping to finance it. And, because that's what I thought you did. And I mean, to this day, probably I would think that's what you do, right? Like, I didn't have enough money to pay it outright. So I was like, okay, I'm going to go finance it. The interest rates at that point were ridiculous. It was like 7% interest. And I was like, okay, like this is I'm going to pay so much for a used car, but all I'm doing is I'm paying interest to the bank. So I took that information and I took it home. So my next step was I would go test drive multiple cars, like multiple. I would look on Kijiji, find every single Honda Civic there was to test out, and I would make my dad go with me, and we would go test drive every single one that we could find around the city. And it was exhausting, but I did it, and I was like, we're just gonna keep going till I find the one. There were so many points I was like, yes, it's gonna be the one, and then you go and look at it and you're like, oh, like no, like they either lied about the mileage or like they didn't disclose a lot of stuff. And so I just kept getting hit with these roadblocks, and I was like, you know what, this is not gonna stop me. I am one person that if you tell me that either I can't do something or that I set my mind to, I am going to go to the ends of the earth to do it. And I think that's part of why manifestation works so well with me, because, and again, that's part of like being a generator with a 1-3 profile, is that for me, I move with my gut instinct. Okay, so it's kind of like I move with a sacral yes or a sacral no, but also I moved with a line action. So whenever I feel like a pull towards something, I have to go do it. So I then dragged one of my friends on a Saturday. I remember it. I dragged one of my friends to go car shopping with me, but to actually go to a dealership because I wanted to know. And when you go to a dealership, you obviously you meet one person, one car dealer I was gonna say car dealer. I guess they kind of are. One salesperson. And he kind of took us through the whole process of what that would look like to get a car. You know, we test drove a Honda Civic. I looked at different options. He took me through their used cars. He took me through financing, like all these different steps. And so I went home with my huge pamphlet and I was so excited because the guy told me, "You know what? You should lease. It's so much cheaper, blah blah blah." Like, gave me the whole spiel. So I went home, told my dad the whole spiel again. And of course, my dad's really good with numbers and spreadsheets, and he's my dad. So he pulled up a spreadsheet, he punched in all the numbers, and he basically broke my heart right then and there to tell me that leasing was, in my case, it didn't make sense because I would be coming out, I would have to pay more in the end. There was just so many things that I didn't know logistically at that point in my life what that meant to lease a car and who it really was serving. Okay? So I went back to the drawing board. I went back to that same guy. I explained to him what my dad said, and I said, I don't want to lease a car, I want to buy a car. So he took me through a bunch of other options. But that year, something really cool that was coming out with the Honda CRV or CRV Civic was that they were creating one that was a special edition because it was some anniversary of the car, okay, some anniversary of the Civic. So they came out with this Honda Civic SE. The special edition was that it didn't have a sunroof, which I didn't want at that point. I didn't want a sunroof. All I wanted was there was this new feature on the car, which was road assist, okay, lane assist, which was so cool. But they had it in this special edition. And I was like, I need this. Like, it would, I guess now in cars, it's in every or most cars, where it kind of like gauges in front of the car in front of you when you're in cruise control, and it would like lane assist me. And I was like, this is so cool. This is, yes, like I need this. So I went home and I was like, okay, how am I going to do this? And I remember my grandparents calling me and telling me that I need to come over. And I was like, okay. And I came over, and my grandparents, they just wanted to let me know how proud they were of how hard I was trying. Okay, how hard I was trying to get a car in some capacity. So they ended up sliding on the table, on the dining room table, a check to me. And I was in shock because my grandparents weren't ones to ever, they were so generous, but like not like this. Like they I love my grandparents' death, and that was the most gracious gift I've ever received from them. Like they wanted to help me out because they saw how hard I was working to try to find a car for myself. And I am forever grateful for that little bit, because that little bit made me feel like I could go even farther. So after that conversation, my dad said, "You know what? Why don't you come with me? We're going to go outside the city where we just bought our new CRV from a dealership. Why don't we go there and see what they can do for you?" And I was like, oh my gosh, like what, we're going to drive an hour and a half out of the city, like to do what? So like that he can tell me that I'm in the same boat as this, like as the guy in the city, like what would he do for me that, this guy couldn't do for me? So we went, you know, we we test drove the car. I showed my dad like how beautiful, how smooth. Like I just felt like I was in my own little sports car and Fast and Furious. Like that's what I wanted. And the guy goes and he like crunches out some numbers, and he's telling me how because my parents bought a car there that, I would get a discount on the interest rate. Now remember, the interest rate at the bank was 7%. All right? The guy comes back to me and he goes, yes, because it's like a Honda Civic, because they're on sale, or not on sale, but because it's like a promotion, and because your parents bought a car here, yeah, your interest would be 0.9%. My face dropped, like my jaw dropped. I was like, what? What do you mean it's 0.9%? He crunched out the numbers again. With the down payment that I was going to give on the car, my monthly payments came out to being $244 a month for this car. Okay, a month. Are you kidding me? And as we were having this discussion, I'm like, I don't know what to do. Like, I was just in shock. I was like, okay, I need to take this information back with me. And he offered me a bunch of stuff that like nobody else could offer me. Like just crazy stuff that the dealership just offered in general. So I took this information back with me and I was just elated. I was like, how is this possible? So I go back to, I was giving the benefit of the doubt to this dealership guy that I in the city that I was working with for probably a month. Like I was going back and forth every week, test driving cars, talking to him, keeping in contact. And then this happens. So I go back to the dealership in the city, and the poor guy just can't match it. He can't match the interest rate. He can't match, all the extra stuff this guy is giving me. He couldn't physically not match it. And so it was so frustrating because, we had worked so hard together. And so unfortunately, I had to go back to the other guy in like an hour and a half away from the city and take this deal. But I was just like, how did this happen? And then as I am about to write this guy a check, because he tells me like, whatever, we're talking about payments and all this stuff, my dad goes, you know what? No, your mom and I, we decided that we wanted to cover this portion of the first payment. And I just looked over to my dad. And again, my jaw dropped. I was like, what is with all this magic money? I think I actually said that out loud to him. I was like, I was so grateful. And I am still to this day so grateful for everything my parents do. But it was one of those moments where I was like, I took a line to action. I somehow ended up at this point, and you know what? I totally manifested this. And I remember when my mom and I went to go pick up my brand new car, that it was again one of those moments where you're like we were standing in the garage with this brand new car, and my mom's just like taking photos of me with my brand new car holding my license plate, and I'm like, how did I get here? Like, how did I get to this point from, not having a car to literally sharing a car with my brother to all of a sudden I have my own car? And I'm not telling you that it was an overnight thing. I think I spent 4 months working and trying and again, trial and erroring this. And it wasn't perfect, but it was so worth it. And again, everyone's going to have their own view of this story, but I will forever say that I manifested my car. It was the first time that I saw something in my mind and was so determined until it was mine. I knew it would happen. How? I don't know. That is not my problem. The how is not your problem. The how you give to the universe, and you're like, that is on you. You are delivering it. I don't care how, but I know it's coming. Okay? The how is never your problem. Your job is to hold the vision and follow the little breadcrumbs being left by the universe to your manifestation. Oh, it just gives me like chills knowing how somehow I created that for myself. After that, it changed the game for me. Anything and everything was possible. Now, fast forward 7 years later, I had put a Honda CRV on my vision board. My partner and I decided we only wanted CRVs because we live in a really cold place with lots of snow, and winter is like 7 months out of the year, something silly. Or it feels like winter is 7 months of the year. But he has a CRV, and I was like, you know what? I was taking advantage of his CRV last year or for the past couple years, and we just realized that it didn't make sense to have one car that really we would baby, and it would sit in the garage for most of the year because it was just too low to the ground and wasn't snow friendly. But I loved my CRV or Civic, and one day I'm gonna get another one. Maybe not like a Civic, but just I loved how it just hugged the road in the summertime. So I put the CRV on my vision board, and honestly, I forgot about it. I put it on maybe 2 summers ago, and we did go looking at some CRVs during that point, but nothing concrete. They kind of like fell through. It didn't really work out, and again, I forgot about it, and it wasn't really important at that time. And so after that, fast forward to June of this past year, my parents start discussions about getting a new CRV and they wanted to trade theirs in for a newer one. And I was like, you know what? Me too. So Jason and I go car shopping and we go try a couple different hybrids, a couple different SUVs, and nothing came of our shopping, but at least we knew what we were looking for, a CRV. Because at first I was like, maybe I'll go try a Subaru or some other types of SUVs, but nothing was jiving. It just like didn't feel right. And so later that night, I visited with my parents and was telling them about our excursion, and this idea just came to me. I was like, why don't I just give them my Civic to trade in? It was newer than the CRV and it had almost no mileage. It was in very good condition. And I was like, and then I will take their CRV, because they wanted to trade theirs in anyways. And they loved the idea. I think the biggest selling point was that my parents had spent so much getting a hitch and getting a bike rack attached to their CRV that they just didn't want. They still have like the bike racks are like perfect. Like you guys can use the bike rack because at that point they were like, what are we going to do? Like this is just they just felt so guilty for just putting a bike rack on the CRV and then they have to get rid of it. And plus they're like, how are we going to move our bikes around? So they loved the idea. So we ended up swapping the cars, and I ended up with a beautiful CRV with everything I needed and more because we have two huge dogs. And yeah, they were comfortable in the Civic, but it just made so much more sense to have two CRVs. So again, this story about my car wasn't as if it fell from the sky. Manifestation doesn't mean that it will fall from the sky. Manifestation simply means bringing what was in your mind's eye into reality. And that's the beauty of it. You've probably done it too in your life, but you've never realized. So, if nothing else, let this be a reminder that manifestation isn't something you need to learn. It's something you're already doing. Maybe today you just notice where it's already working. So I want to end this with a reflection question. Where in my life have I already manifested something without calling it that? And as always, I'm really grateful you're here. Until next time.